Here we have the review of the new Royal Enfield Meteor 350.
And what an easy ride this is. Smooth, easy power.
I have to say, pretty impressed. You know, it's a low cc, low horsepower machine, very simple, but it is a great beginner bike. When you're learning to ride a motorcycle, it's all about trying to just gain confidence, doing the most simple things. And this does all of those simple things really well. Clutch, brakes, comes to a stop, it's light, it feels good, it's got a good chassis. All of the things that you need just to gain confidence. And this is just a street bike that I would aim at anybody who's new to riding, used to ride, wants to get back into it. Start off with a motorcycle like this. You can only go up from here in terms of performance, but it's a bike that you can really get going on. It's also, I think, a motorcycle that if you did get going on, you're going to fall in love with. I wasn't expecting much, so I kept off the freeways because this bike only does about 70 miles an hour. And when you're doing 70 miles an hour and that's your flat out speed and everything's going around you much faster, it's not the best experience. So I just kept off the freeways and did all of my riding in this kind of the urban environment. And what a great bike it is. How many bikes I passed just because this was so nimble through traffic. It's not got a lot of power, so I was not getting off the line sometimes as fast as some of those bigger bikes, but when it came to being in a jam, I could easily slide by. So yeah, this bike is really good in the urban environment. Real soft, comfortable seat here. Low seat height, just over 30 inches, so motorcycles are a lot heavier than bicycles, and when you're a new rider, sometimes it's a shock to the system of how heavy a motorcycle can be. Having 2 feet easily planted on the floor gives you confidence. And also for short riders, I do not have the longest legs, so I know what it was like being on motocross bikes as a young kid. I could hardly touch the floor. That's not very confidence inspiring. It's much more confidence inspiring when you can touch the floor at low speeds and then just gain how to ride properly and more with taller bikes from there. And it's also got a really comfortable stance as well. The ergonomics of the bike, an easy riding position, just kind of easy to ride bars. It's got a front wheel that's slightly bigger than the rear wheel. We've got a 19 on the front, a 17 on the rear. So you're really sat in that kind of like cruiser position. Very much like the Honda Rebel, and then going up from there, any cruiser, even a Harley Davidson. It's a very similar riding position, just a lot different with the engine. Now the engine is the star of the show. It's a single cylinder, and even though it doesn't kick out a lot of horsepower, it's a really nice engine. It's a really smooth engine. And I've ridden with the Royal Enfield before, the Himalayan, and a similar engine, a little more cc, but that wasn't smooth, especially on the freeway. This is. So I feel like they've made a huge step with the engine. Royal Enfield, great job. I love it. But I'm pretty sure if you changed out this exhaust and maybe even a different fuel map, I bet this engine would give out more performance. Now it's only a 5-speed, and I say only because most motorcycles these days are a 6-speed. But I didn't miss that 6th gear either because I wasn't going on the freeway. I did do a little experiment on the freeway, but I just couldn't. LA traffic is not doing 70 miles an hour. Much faster most of the time, and I just don't like to be just kind of swamped with traffic. It doesn't really go much above 75, flat out, downhill with a wind behind you. Uphill, it's more like 65, so when you're doing that on the freeway, I didn't feel very good. But on the back streets, on the normal high streets, in the city, downtown, everywhere else I took it, it was a super bike for that. Now, it has a passenger seat, some nice open grab rails here, some comfy pegs, so it's also comfortable to take a passenger to, or a bag here and take it out of the city and escape for the weekend. Brake-wise, it's a 2-piston on the front, a single on the rear. It's got ABS, dual ABS. It does work. It's not that intrusive, so riders can really get used to braking properly and staying off the ABS. However, you can't turn the ABS off if you're an experienced rider. But I just don't think that this bike is designed for any experienced rider, as experienced riders are going to want more oomph out of the engine and just a bit more performance on every other level. Because what you tend to do when you're a new rider are just grab handfuls of front brake or stomp on the rear, because new riders just don't have the experience or the feel. A bike like this allows you to get away with taking chunks of front brake or rear brake. The ABS isn't too intrusive, but it is there to help you. For a bike this weight and this performance, the brakes were pretty damn good. Now dash-wise, you've got a mixture of a digital and an analog, a digital speed gauge and some digital information. The digital information is pretty small, so you've got to really get used to the dash. And it's also got a pretty nifty navigation system. So if you download the Royal Enfield app, you've then got use of this navigation system, and that's super handy in these days. With the mirrors, you can see everything out of them, well positioned, no problems there. I had no problems with the light riding the bike at night either. A nice big gas tank, so you can do plenty of miles. Now it doesn't have a lot of ground clearance, but I have to say, I wasn't really scraping anything going around some of the turns here. In the city, you just don't either. If I had any negative points, I have to say about this bike, it's more in the suspension. It's very basic suspension. But then again, what do you expect for a bike that's less than 4.5 grand? For the most part, it's just fine. It glides around corners, it goes through traffic, it sits on the freeway. It doesn't really have too many problems. When it does have problems is when I was either trying to ask more out of it performance-wise, or if I hit something quite aggressive. Now, if you hit a bump quite aggressive, the rear suspension really is, I mean, it's adequate, but you do feel it, and I felt it several times, just kick me in the back. So you could definitely improve this bike, I think, by putting some upgraded shocks on it, and that would even make the bike even better. If I've got anything negative to really say about this motorcycle, I'd probably just say that weird gear shifter. I mean, changing gear for a new rider is probably the most difficult thing that they're doing, and this just makes it more confusing. Also, by having a heel shifter, it seems to me that they've reduced the gap between the foot peg and the toe shift, because they're not wanting you to get your foot under it to shift up. They're wanting you to use the heel, or for you to use your toe or whatever however, but you press on the back. So to try and get your toe under there, it's very short. So I feel like anybody with probably over a size 8 would feel it kind of quite uncomfortable. I did, I'm a size 10 and I could barely get my foot under there. It's very awkward. So Royal Enfield, please just put a gear shifter on there, get rid of that heel shifter, put it the right distance apart, and yeah, awesome. But overall, I really have been impressed with the Meteor. It's an easy to ride bike, it's better than I expected, it's a great beginner bike, it's cheap, and if you did get one, I'm pretty sure you keep it in your garage for a very long time. It's definitely a winner. I think Royal Enfield have done a great job with this. It's definitely going to get new people riding. Thumbs up to that. Ticks many boxes. Royal Enfield, good job. Go check it out. For me, yeah, but for me, anyway, like I said, I have to say, but I have to say,